During Season 4, Fortnite players started using the cone build to block players from below. This simple blocking technique shifted the building meta dramatically, creating a new and effective way to fight back for high ground from behind. As the cone block became increasingly popular, different techniques were developed to respond to being obstructed, including self-coning and simple ramp turnarounds. It wasn't until Season 5, however, that the community began to realize that you could jump to the side of cones placed above you and catch yourself with the floor to skirt around being cut off mid-build. Soon, the cone jump became an incredibly important option for responding to cone blocks, offering one of the most reliable and efficient ways to hold height by allowing players to maintain most of their forward momentum without compromising on vertical movement. Today, we're going over cone jumps. Before I get into the video, I quickly wanted to point out that this is part of a series I'm working on where I cover every known building technique in Fortnite based on a ton of research I've done reviewing over 200 videos. If you want to check out more content like this, I'll share links to previous and future videos in the description below. Catches broadly refer to the use of builds to catch a player after jumping or falling and often manifest as techniques to sneak an additional height, prevent fall damage, or gain more control while building. Developing mastery of catches enables players to navigate builds more fluidly and access better positions and angles, improving their chances of finding opportunities to leverage against opponents. The cone jump, also often called the scissor jump and sometimes the side jump, is one of the most useful catches to learn. It offers fast height, and scenarios where it's possible crop up time and time again against high-skilled opponents due to how important cones are in build fighting. Despite the name, cone jumps are possible even when players are blocked by floors, and are possible in any scenario where players are directly covered from above but have some open space to the side and diagonally upwards from them. Although cone jumps are relatively simple, they can still be deconstructed. Cone jumps have three main parts: the approach, the midair, the landing, and the bubble boy. Wait, no. I'm pretty sure that last one's a Seinfeld episode.
Alright, bubble boy. Let's just play.
Anyways, let's get into all the variations and options you can perform while cone jumping. A lot of players struggle with figuring out how to do the standard cone jump at first. Here are some quick ways to ensure you have the correct timing and positioning for your jump. Aim to jump from the edge of the ramp. You can easily practice this by running towards the edge and jumping as late as you can. If you jump too late, you simply won't jump. If you press jump too soon, you'll bump your head. Understand where you need to jump from. Anywhere on the ramp where your jump will carry your character more than 50% above the next story is sufficient for a cone jump. You can test the different points on the ramp by standing on the edge and jumping while strafing with your floor out to see how high you're going. Try different approach paths to find one that's comfortable for you. Also, try paths for when your character might be cone blocked late and you're higher up on the ramp. You don't actually have to start on a ramp to cone jump, and there are a few alternate scenarios where you can cone jump to the side without a ramp. You can cone jump from a cone if you're unable to edit the cone you're standing on. This is similarly as challenging as cone jumping backwards from a ramp, and you can also cone jump from most low wall edits, which can be useful for saving mats. Most players are familiar with cone jumps to the side, on the left, or the right, but you can actually cone jump to every surrounding tile besides directly behind the cone. Forwards diagonal jumps require you to jump from higher up and need 2 floors to connect. They are useful for when you want to continue moving in the direction you are headed. Backwards jumps have a tight window for jumping from the ramp and are useful for when you have no side jump options available. Credit goes to Curtis for this jump. Finally, backwards diagonal jumps have an extremely tight window for jumping and are one of the hardest cone jumps to execute. There are frankly very few scenarios where it's useful, as you would need to be blocked off in almost all directions, but it is a neat flex. Credit goes to Vorwin for this jump. Before you even jump, there are several builds you can place to provide cover, block opponents, and reinforce yourself. Placing a floor below the cone reinforces your next builds, preventing the cone from being an isolated weak point. Placing a wall by looking through the cone provides you with an early horizontal cover. If you place both a floor and a wall, you must edit through the floor first to place the wall. Note that if you edit the floor in half, it will no longer reinforce your builds. Placing a ramp by looking right below the cone also provides you with early cover that is slightly better than a wall. Pre-placing a ramp, however, limits how your character can land because it's possible to bump into the ramp while jumping. Furthermore, it prevents you from landing above a ramp when cone jumping. Placing a cone one story above you is possible if you place either a ramp or a wall, but it's easier with a ramp. This cone provides additional cover and reinforcements and also can potentially block opponents. Placing a cone where you will be jumping and immediately breaking it by editing it can distort your opponent, and also it makes it harder for them to cone block you while you're jumping. Presumably, you can also do this with a floor, but it's not really as useful, and I suppose a ramp, but also not as useful. Because none of these builds fully block others from being placed, you can actually pre-place all of them in a cone jump. Here, I place everything, but I don't do a cone break first, which is theoretically possible, but is insanely difficult to do. While you're in the air, there are a few builds you can place that are potentially useful. If you pre-placed a wall, you can place a second wall above that wall to extend cover and possibly block an opponent. Credit goes to Coach 21 for this variation. If you pre-placed a wall or a ramp, you can also place a cone or a floor in midair instead of before you've jumped to provide vertical cover. You can place walls to your sides to provide horizontal cover, and like with the approach builds, you can compose these all together if you'd like. Some edits are easier to perform mid-air or can only reliably be performed mid-air. If you pre-place a cone, you can edit it open and place a floor quickly enough to prevent it from breaking. If you pre-place a floor, you can edit through it to provide some cover during your jump. If you pre-place a floor and a cone, you can edit through both to provide extra cover during your jump. This is really challenging and has a lot of awkward angles since the cone edit is deceptively hard to reach. Credit goes to Upsilon for being the first person I saw to pull this off. When you land a cone jump, it's actually possible to land on a ramp and not just a floor. You can ramp land in 3 directions, to the side, backwards, and forwards. You can do this with or without a floor, but it's much easier with a floor. Ramp lands place you slightly higher than floor lands and are useful for setting up quick follow-ups. To do the floorless variants, you must look straight up to place the ramp since the floor isn't available to provide a placement area. For forwards and backwards ramp only lands, you must pre-place a wall to connect the ramp. You can also ramp land low to make cone jumps easier. This will widen your windows for success, but can cause you to land lower. This can be done with most floor-based cone jumps, for example, the backwards and diagonal backwards cone jumps. Credit goes to Connor for this trick. It's also possible to land on a cone when cone jumping. Like ramp lands, you can cone land with or without a floor, but it's easier with a floor. You should look up when doing a cone only land because it's easy to accidentally place cones too low when looking down. I'll be the first to admit it though. When I initially was figuring out cone lands, which haven't really been explored much, I couldn't really come up with a good reason for why I would ever do one over a ramp land. After some testing and theory crafting, however, I was able to conclude a couple of things. Cone landing and editing the cone into a 90 was the fastest way I could find to do this specific type of 90. This provides you with some back cover while also letting you turn around. It is, however, slower than the forward ramp variant, but that one doesn't cover your back. Cone landing without a floor is the cheapest way to start a 90, although it limits the type of 90 you can do and is ultimately not cheaper against low-cost 90s like no-wall 90s. And finally, cone landing is pretty unique and no one really does it, so people might think it looks cool that you do them, so there is that. Upon landing, and depending on how you land, there are a few common ways to follow up out of a cone jump. If you land on a floor, you can easily start a scissor ramp by looking downwards to place a floor above you to gain cover. You can also jump and ramp in any direction. If you land on a ramp, you can quickly do 90s afterwards to gain height. If you land on a ramp and have a pre-placed wall, you can start a scissor ramp by looking upwards to gain cover. And if you land on a cone, you can edit the cone like I mentioned earlier and do 90s off of the corner or a ramp edit. So, that's it. That's everything I know and have gathered about cone jumps all in one place. Hopefully, you found this guide to be useful and were able to learn something new from it. If you're interested in more content like this, I'll be continuing this series with more categories of building techniques that I've researched, so stay tuned. If I missed anything, feel free to let me know, and I'll put additions and corrections in the description below. Thanks for watching. By the way, follow me on Twitter. Cool, thanks, bye!
Now it's 4 a.m. and I'm back up popping with the crew. I just landed in, Chase B mixes pop like Jamba Juice. Different color chains, think my jeweler really selling fruit.
Surrender, retreat, we all in too deep. Plan for keeps, don't play us.